So, first I just want to say that the conditions of the occupation in the West Bank should concern and trouble everybody in this room. They should concern you if you come to this issue primarily out of a deep commitment and love of Israel, and they should concern you if you come to this issue because of your concern about what's happening to the Palestinians. They should concern you if you come to this issue primarily out of a commitment to Israel, because without a Palestinian state, Israel can no longer be a Jewish homeland and a democracy. This is why former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert and former Prime Minister Ehud Barak have both said that without a two-state solution, Israel becomes either an apartheid state or a binational nation. The conditions of the occupation should concern you if you are standing in solidarity with Palestinians, because the existence of daily life in the West Bank, as President Barack Obama has said, is intolerable for people who live under occupation. So the question then is, what do we do about it? What do we do here to be able to bring about a solution that, as expediently as possible, ends the suffering of those who live under occupation and creates the possibility for a democratic Jewish homeland over the coming generation? Now, there are two reasons why I personally, and J Street as an organization, do not support the boycott, divest movement. The first is a matter of principle, and the second is a matter of strategy. And I want to take each in turn. It's important to recognize that boycotts are a tactic. They are neutral. They are a tool. They can be used for good or they can be used for ill. Certainly, there are examples in our history of their use for great social progress. The Montgomery bus boycott, the boycott of South Africa, that brought about apartheid. But boycotts were also used to perpetuate segregation in Boston with the busing in the late 80s. Boycotts were used in Europe to target particular ethnic minorities. So we need to understand that the question we should be asking is, what are the ends that we're aiming for? What are the ends of this movement? You don't judge a movement based on its tactics, you judge it based on its aims. So what are the aims of the BDS movement? Well, the name BDS, boycott, divestment, sanctions, in that it encompasses so many tactics, should give us a clue that this is a somewhat opaque question, or an opaque answer. But if you look at the stated aims of the BDS movement, which are quite blatantly and clearly presented on their website, the stated aims of the BDS movement are an end to the state of Israel. Now, this is not an aim that I support. This is not an aim that J Street supports. This may be an aim that some folks at this table support, but that is the aims of this movement. So, let's talk for a second about why it is that we find that so morally problematic. Those who dismiss the aspirations of Jews to control their own political destiny dismiss a history of persecution that goes back 2,000 years. Those who dismiss the Jewish connection to the land of Israel dismiss 2,000 years in which Jews longed for a return to that land. Those who decry Israel as the Zionist entity, who refuse to even say the name, dismiss much that is worth celebrating: the revitalization of an ancient language, the establishment of a political system, the world community's vote after the Holocaust to create a sanctuary and a refuge for a people that had experienced such decimation. Dismissing these realities is tantamount to dismissing a people's self-definition. And many at this table find this vile when it is targeted at Palestinians, as they well should. But it is an injustice no matter who it is targeted against. That does not lead one to necessarily believe that the founding came, like some great natural, the story that many of us were taught in day school, that this was a land for a people, for a land with a land that had no people, right? I mean, the costs of the founding are real, and they need to be dealt with. However, labeling Israel as the criminal and the Palestinians as the victim dismisses the tragedy and loss suffered by both. In traveling through the Palestinian territories, it is almost impossible to meet a Palestinian who does not have a friend or a family who has spent time in an Israeli jail. And in traveling around Israel, it is impossible to meet Israelis who have not had loved ones and friends that have died as a result of terrorist attacks. This suffering is real on both sides. An approach that places the entirety of the blame on one party, that dismisses their suffering as self-imposed, is morally suspect and unethical. And this is no less true when it is perpetuated upon the party with considerably more power in this conflict as when it is perpetrated by that party. A movement that erases one people's history and experience and suffering is a movement in which I will not participate. So that is the principles argument. I want to turn now to the strategic argument. I come to this work after almost a decade in community organizing. And one of the lessons of community organizing is that you judge an action based on its reaction. You don't judge it based on whether it feels right. You judge it based on what is the reaction that it provokes. So what is the reaction to BDS? What is the reaction to these boycott movements, efforts? First, and this is something that we've heard already something about tonight. Given that many of the most vocal proponents of BDS seek an end to Israel, it should come as little surprise that so many Israelis see BDS as confirmation that the world is against them. And this is not just the sort of radical right wing of Israel. This is why Bradley Burston, who's one of the most prominent columnists in Haaretz and a very committed proponent of Palestinian statehood, wrote last year in the midst of the BDS effort at Berkeley, "If I were a person who wanted to see the Israeli occupation of Palestinian land continue as long as possible, I would be beside myself with relish at the thought of the current BDS campaign at the University of Berkeley." So, what Burston understands is that ultimately a peace deal will have to be accepted by Israelis. And a global movement that seeks to erase Israel only solidifies opposition to a deal rather than creating a climate necessary for peace. Second, on campus, and you probably all saw this, BDS polarizes and divides students and faculty. To end this occupation and create a two-state solution, we need to build some real power. We need to create a network of allies and organizational alliances. BDS is not a strategy that is going to get us there. Suddenly, when a proposal emerges at a college campus, stark lines are drawn between supporters and detractors. The possibility of a real broad constituency evaporates. Lastly, and this is particularly tragic for those of us who come to this issue pained by the conversation within the Jewish community, BDS is a beautiful, bow-tied gift to a very well-organized and vocal group that are bent on maintaining the occupation and ensuring Palestinians never see their own state. These extremists label all those who criticize Israel as longing for its destruction. They speak of the need for peace, but mendaciously place the responsibility solely on Palestinians, and they give lip service to the notion of two states while defending policies that make it ever more difficult to achieve. These folks love BDS. They love it because it serves their purpose of deflecting concern from discussions of water or detention or settlements. They love it because it ensures that they do not have to defend a status quo that if perpetrated will render a Jewish democratic homeland a historical anecdote. The fact that here at Princeton, where the initiative was watered down to include only an alternative to Sabra hummus, and that it failed at Berkeley, given Berkeley's political legacy, demonstrates that this is an argument that my friends Rebecca and Max are going to lose. So, if the result that you are pursuing is to draw stark battle lines on your college campus, to polarize your community, to alienate alumni and campus institutions, to give the organized right wing a mighty tool in their campaign to slander those who condemn the occupation, then BDS is very effective. But if your goal is to begin to figure out how do we build the capacity and the power to end this occupation and create a two-state solution, this is not a strategy we should